For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, we are live and amplified. So let's get ready to podcast.
Fire it up.
Welcome, everybody, to another live and amplified livecast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we are back at it again with another amazing podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Megan Graney. How's it going today, Megan?
It's good. It's 7 a.m. here in Los Angeles.
Woo!
Bright and early.
It's always funny because for whatever reason, every podcast that I book on a Sunday, they're always out in LA. And it's like,
really?
yeah, every Sunday podcast. It's like, I don't know if you guys just get up early or if it's, whatever. Like the Sunday podcast is the only one that I book early.
Oh, interesting.
And so, yeah, so it's always interesting. But I appreciate you waking up early and getting the show on the road.
Yeah.
I've been up since 4 a.m. But
oh my gosh,
that's neither here nor there.
You're like the early bird gets the worm.
Well, no, I got my second COVID vaccination yesterday, and I woke up at 4 a.m. and I was like, felt the worst I have ever felt in my life.
No.
Yeah, like,
and still feeling the same way while doing this.
And so I woke up at 4, and I was like, I had like just pains, aches, cold sweats. And I was just sitting there, I'm like, I didn't feel this way after the first one. What's going on? And I got up and I just started moving around. I took some aspirin and everything just kind of started to subside a bit. And I'm like, all right, cool. I don't have to make that weird call at 8 a.m. or whatever it is. Say, hey, do this podcast. But nope, we got it under control and I'm excited. So
what a trooper. You are powering through.
I feel a lot better. Had I woke up at 8:30 feeling the way I felt at 4 a.m., we would have definitely not be having this conversation right now.
For sure. No, that was a good call. But oh my God.
Luckily, I woke up at 4 o'clock and I was just like, oh man, it's like 30 degrees outside. I shouldn't be sweating right now. What is going on here? So, I got up but once I got moving, took some aspirin, I was good. So
that's awesome.
But I'm really excited to have you on. I know you're going to be on our fundraising podcast next week, so this is going to be kind of a fun precursor to that interview.
Exactly.
For all the people that don't know who you are or kind of what your backstory is, what is your backstory into music? What got you into music?
Sure. So what really got me into music was choir. That's a nerd alert. I basically was singing in groups since I was a wee little me, since elementary school and on. And then once it kind of kicked into high school, college, that's when I started really wanting to do more actual, let me study this and like get a degree and learn some theory and do the thing. And then I ended up just going to Berklee College of Music in Boston. So that way I could actually study vocal jazz, and then kind of shifted into a music business management degree, just because I found it fascinating how many loopholes and nuances there are with artists and all the things that we should just be aware of in general on the business side. So I worked and I worked at I basically did a zigzag in my career where it was like I started singing young. That was always kind of what fueled my soul from the get-go and made me happy and brought me joy. And then like adulthood me was like, maybe you should learn. I think I just was yearning for like well-roundedness.
Yeah.
Because I had heard some horror stories with people just getting taken advantage of by the industry, which is pretty common, sad to say.
Yeah, that story is a very common tale. But
which is like awful. So, and then I moved out to Los Angeles maybe 5 years ago.
Okay.
That chunk has flown by. It's become a blur in a good way. though. And I ended up getting sucked into the film scoring world.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically just means those who compose music for film and TV, they're marrying the music to the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing more assistant work where I was actually still on the business end, but like managing a studio and helping coordinate sessions for orchestra players and choir singers who are doing like those epic cues in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're sitting in the chair, you don't really realize all the things that are happening to shape how you feel
Yep.
in the seat. But I got to see music from that perspective and was just more of a coordinator role, a management role, and was working for film composers in that capacity for like 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't until last year I started thinking about really writing my own songs and diving into my own body of work. And I think the stuff that I learned from like directors and producers, how they really good ones tend to layer a ton of symbolism within picture. So you might be looking at something for 30 seconds, but there's so many messages just within that one, visually, the dialogue, also the music. And that I really appreciated that kind of art. So I started adapting. It's not a new thing. I've adapted a lot of that into my storytelling with my own songs, and just started writing my own songs. I think the album will be done top of 2022.
Nice. Yeah.
And then we released Waves at the end of August, and that was pretty much an homage to anyone grieving. I had lost my dad last year to more of like a long-term illness with heart failure over 12 years of my life. But it was really more to anyone who's just kind of going through a massive shift, either with family or friends. And it doesn't even need to be extreme loss of a parent or a family member. It could honestly just be people being like, this person doesn't resonate with me anymore. I think we're going to take some space, and just kind of going through the motions of life. So each song on the album has specific emotional themes that I wrote to, and me and my co-writer Mitchell Hauser, I would basically come to him with lyrics and a melody and like a vision idea of what I was hearing in my brain, and he can kind of play 4 instruments fluently and would just start helping compose the foundation, and then we would layer from there, and it would end up being most of the songs sound pretty cinematic, which was awesome. It's like a very it's what I had hoped to be, and then more, because there's much more magic when you actually work with other people to like make something come into fruition, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I want to jump into off of what you just said. So I'm trying to figure out where to
I just threw everything at you.
Well, let's talk about, you're originally from San Francisco, and then you ended up going to Berkeley and Boston. Is that how did you kind of get from San Francisco?
That's confusing. Only because there's UC Berkeley in California, and then there's Berkeley with 2 E's at the end in Boston.
Yeah. So how did you get from San Francisco to Boston? Had you been living in Boston, or was it just always someplace you wanted to go?
I think I ended up doing my first 2 years of college at Sonoma State. So that's like up near Napa and wine country. And I was still singing there, but it was a much more smaller program, which was great. I think my teachers were saying, if you really want to go heavy into like vocal jazz specifically, or learn more soulful genres, instead of just being like a trained classical mezzo soprano your whole life and doing opera, which wasn't really resonating me for a long-term situation. They kept mentioning Berkeley. So that was a whole extensive process of an application, an audition, getting in, and then seeing, okay, how can we make this happen and make the move? across the country because my whole family is like from the Bay Area. They're more from if you have San Francisco on the left and then you cross the bridge, then there's Oakland and Berkeley. They're from the East Bay. They're from over there. So everyone's over in Northern California. And then afterwards, then I made my way back to my home state, but then went south. To go into the major hub of it. Yeah,
absolutely. How's you've been in LA now for 5 years. You moved to LA directly after you graduated from Berkeley?
I went back to the East Bay to try and it's much more tech oriented. There's definitely a niche scene going on there. I think with more, at least from what I've been learning, like with the Bay Area, even Seattle, it's like you have to establish yourself in like New York or LA first, and then you can go once you've had time and are connected to the right people in order for you to do that. But I ended up taking a year off in between, almost 2 years, to actually help take care of my dad and be a caretaker and help my mom, and took a major chunk of time to just reprioritize my life and help them and be present. And I can say that it was tough, but it was time very much needed. I think if I was like 50-year-old me, I would maybe regret not doing certain choices in that order. So that was worth it. And then once my mom was like, okay, we're good, we seem to be stable, she was like, fly free, go to LA.
There's a lot of parallels in there with what you were just talking about in my life, because I was in a similar situation.
Really?
My dad had prostate cancer, not heart problems, and I was living in Tallahassee, Florida, working for a TV station down there, and my parents live in the East Coast, so like South Florida, but on the East Coast there. And so luckily I was in Tallahassee when he got diagnosed. He was like, all right, if we can get on this quick, I'm going to be fine. We're going to go do some proton radiation treatment. And unless my body just completely rejects everything, we'll be fine. And so he went up to Jacksonville, him and my mom, and I would go out and visit him every weekend, just because it was a 3-hour drive versus 6 hours or whatever it was prior. So it was a lot easier for me to pull off those drives. And I'd go out there and make sure they're good. And then my dad gets to a point where he's like, okay, you're good. And I come out here to Texas. And then, but a year later, my mom gets diagnosed. We'll get into that a lot more next week. She got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So I ended up going back down to Florida for 3 months, and to kind of help my mom and my dad and all that fun stuff. So
And are you an only sibling?
No, I have a sister. She's 3 years younger than me. So I have a younger sister, but she's already married and all that stuff. So she was trying to keep her home life in balance, and she's got a job that isn't as flexible as mine. Like I do work for a TV station as a creative producer, so I just edit commercials and graphics and all that fun stuff. So I could technically do that anywhere. And they're like, "Yo, go to Florida. Your mom's like really sick. It doesn't matter where you work. Anything you have to shoot, we can do it." So it ended up being a bad scenario, but I was glad I got to be there. So I know it's like such a bittersweetness, because you just can't replace time. Absolutely. And then I was listening, as I was preparing for this interview, I was listening to Waves, and I started picking up on a lot of the symbolism in there, and I was like, okay. And as I was listening to it, it was just like, this all makes sense now. So
oh whoa, that's crazy. I know. And then all of they're kind of like little light bulb moments, little connections where that's happening, which is so great because most of the friends that I have who have lost someone or have not even that, you do kind of go through a weird version of grief when you're taking in a caretaker position, especially with a terminal illness. And or at least something that's long term too. So I feel like a lot of the friends and family and people who are starting to discover me, that was kind of hitting home. I was a little nervous to I'm like, I'm a new artist, but I was like, gonna write it anyway. And hope it
you
lands.
got it out there, and it's a really good song. I love Waves. It's on my playlist now, so it's gonna be
awesome.
It's gonna be there. What since we're talking about that song specifically, how long ago did you write that song?
Oh my. It was maybe summertime.
Okay.
The summertime, beginning of the summer.
Okay.
Maybe a little. I think the idea started birthing itself in spring, which is kind of funny because it's like paralleling nature.
Yeah.
And then we finished it by like beginning of August.
Yeah.
And then it was good to go. I mean, I think that song was such a cathartic experience for me because even the way I was able to sing on it, Mitchell, my co-writer, was like, this would be cool if we did layers of background vocals of just me, and it's like making you feel like the tide is like coming in and like coming out. And things like that. And he played piano, and I was like, I just want it to feel like this like ethereal rolling effect where you're kind of like suspended in time, almost meditative in a way. And he was like, okay, we can do this.
I was actually going to ask who it was playing piano.
It was Mitchell.
Okay.
Yeah, he's pretty much, he's the guy that is playing almost most of the instruments on every song. On Borrowed Time, we actually had real horn players, like actual session players, do that. But he can play bass and guitar and piano, and I'm probably missing a few, but those are like the main three that he can jump on, and like he can play drums and stuff, but like those three, he's like many people in one. So if I have ideas, he's got such a good ear. If I sing certain lines to him, he can like work it out on an instrument. So it's really nice where if like I get a ping of some kind of creativity, and then he's like, I got you, I can actually get this onto the instrument you want. And I'm like, woo. Yeah.
Nice. So you got the album, you don't have a specific date, but you're thinking beginning of 2022, hopefully.
I think so. Yeah, I'm just finishing, there's 5 songs that are done.
Okay.
And then I'm finishing a 6th one.
Okay.
So I'm trying to finish that, the last one.
Okay. So it'll be like a long EP almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets into that weird point of 5-6 songs. Do you still consider that an EP, or is it?
I know. And then I had to look up the technicalities. It was like, if it's minimum of 30 minutes, then it's considered an album or something like that. I was like, oh my gosh, all the terminology. But I think we might do like a cool intro, outro.
Yeah.
Just to kind of set you up into that zone. So, and we're going to order it as every artist, I would imagine, but we're going to order each song as like a portal for you to kind of enter into like an emotional experience. And Waves was much more about like catharsis and grief and that, but in like a very peaceful, hopeful way.
Yeah.
And Borrowed Time was like gratitude. So
are you gonna look at doing a 3rd single to promote the upcoming album, or is that not
I am.
Nice.
Great question.
I have to ask, because it's like there's still plenty of time that you could
Oh,
maybe
for sure.
get a third single out, but
I know.
sometimes off those EPs, you don't want to give everything away as a single, but
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true. And then at the same time, you're trying to like, I know friends who've dropped like full projects and then like no one heard any of it because the attention span has changed so much for people to even absorb and like intake music and even like really genuinely want to care about someone that's releasing anything, just because there's so much going on at the same time too. So the third song, I think we've landed on the date. It was going to be Friday, December 10th.
Okay.
So right before Christmas. And that song is called Love the Lie. And it's basically just about, how can I explain this? When you're around your friends or your family or coworkers, there's a certain version of you that you're kind of presenting. I would imagine most people are pretty consistent on some level, but there are definitely things that we just like consciously choose to omit in certain scenarios, either to protect ourselves or to whatever intention is behind that. So to me, I was like, oh no, this kind of seems like, I feel like all of us do this on some level, in some form, not in a negative way. It just kind of is a human nature thing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it would be really cool to write a song that's like honoring, no matter what you're showing me, I'm still loving it. Even if the version of the truth of you that I'm getting is like, could partially be a lie. Cause I feel like only the actual person knows what's going on with them at all times, no matter what. So I don't know. That was my concept, but it's a very like, it's a similar vibe to Borrowed Time, where it's like a soulful groove. And I'm very happy with it. We got the artwork back. Our graphic designer killed it. There's some really good symbolism within that as well. And it's basically just like a lot of stuff that I write about too, is about confronting your shadow self, basically all of the yummy, dark parts of you that we tend to resist for life. So I think after my dad had passed away, it was a very big reality check on my quality of life and things that I really needed to look at within myself and nurture myself and take care of myself. I had a tendency of putting a lot of other people first, not in a bad way. That just came with like me not prioritizing me, which is kind of easy to do when like you really care.
And I definitely relate to that on a lot of levels, because after my mom passed, I started realizing that I force myself to do stuff even if I don't want to do it. Now there's like there's a difference in just toughing it out and sticking with it versus just straight up forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do. And I was doing that for a long time, and I was kind of ignoring, and I was producing a lot of bad content because it's like, well, I don't really want to talk to this person. It's like they don't have anything that I'm interested. There's just nothing I really want to talk about.
Right.
And so then after my mom passed, it just kind of became a lot of, I'm not feeling this podcast today, so I'm going to tell them, hey, we need to reschedule, or hey, we need to cancel, whatever it is. So,
sure.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's like your filter gets a little bit more refined.
Yeah.
After you are like around someone facing their own mortality, because you in your own way are like doing it with them, but with yourself.
Yep. Absolutely.
Too. So I totally resonate with that.
That's why after next weekend's like podcast marathon thing, that fundraiser, I've got 6 weeks marked off in the calendar, and I'm doing my best to hold myself to that that break and just kind of
Good.
reset. There was a point there where I found myself trying to book stuff during that time, just like
Right.
off the records.
Right.
And I'm like, no, you have 6 weeks off for a reason.
Right.
Take it. You know?
Yeah.
So I've already got the full screen made for social. Be like, I'm on break. If you need me, contact me January 1.
That's
Boom.
it.
And it's going on all my social medias. So
that's amazing. You're like taking quality time for me.
yep.
See you on the other side.
That's exactly what's going on. And then hopefully I don't come out January 1 and just completely burn myself into the ground, because I'm known to do that.
Oh no. I mean, honestly, it's an easy thing to do. Like our culture like rewards it and incentivizes it. Like I burned out maybe pretty quick coming into Los Angeles, because you can work. You just work.
Yeah.
And my system got ran into the ground. I was like, oh no, I was not listening to my body. And my body was like, hey, we're doing all signs of cries for help, and you are not acknowledging this.
Yep. And so now we're going to just shut you down because you're not listening.
Which is usually how it goes. It's like little whispers and then it's like screams.
Yep, absolutely. And then you kind of brought this up a little bit ago. How's life in LA been? Obviously, LA is a different animal altogether than Northern California and Boston, with it being the entertainment hub, and people can get sucked up in the life really quick and just kind of, so how's the adaptation been for you? How's the LA life been for you? Obviously, you'd mentioned you got yourself burned out pretty quickly, but
for sure. First moving here was definitely a lifestyle adjustment, and also just like absorbing the different kinds of people here. I mean, there's so much good here too, if you're able to like super focus and not get distracted and not, you know what I mean? Just because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
I definitely had to adjust to the culture here. And I'm still adjusting to culture here sometimes, where there's a lot. It's just it took me a bit to find like my tribe, so to speak, where like you just got to find your people and find the good people who just naturally resonate with you and like your work ethic and what you have to offer, and like really value you. I think everyone kind of learns a lesson here of like your value and self-worth when you first start out, because when you're beginning, it's just easy to not even settle. You just have to like work your way up the totem pole and start from ground zero.
Yep.
And I understand why that paradigm exists, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Just because it takes advantage of a lot of younger people who don't have a precedent to compare it to anything else to. I did, just because I had worked in Boston before I had moved down here. So it was interesting for me to kind of like really have to swallow like my pride and my ego and just like get super humbled, still get humbled all the time. And the only thing I can say is that there is for sure a layer of superficialness. And this area is so interesting because you can see like people who are living in a totally different realm, a reality of resources than other people. So to kind of like live in that paradox is really interesting. And I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just a very interesting thing to observe when you're here, because it's like highly condensed areas, and sometimes the people match the setting and sometimes they don't. You get like nice surprises of people who are like just have incredible character
Mhm.
and want to pass on that wisdom and want to help people,
Yeah.
and like I would say like to find a mentor and people who like are really seeing potential in younger people, that's a massive game changer than to feel like you're like overwhelmed and trying to carve out your path here. And it's not to be a negative Nancy, it's just the reality here. Like this city is kind of a beast to
Yeah.
survive in, and just like standard of living costs.
I mean, I can only imagine what it costs to live in LA. Like I've got a couple of friends out there that are in the film business, and
Mhm.
they just recently started really getting themselves to a point where they're not eating ramen noodles
Right.
20
Yeah.
times, um,
Rationing.
yeah, they're rationing off their instant ramen just so they can have something to eat later in the day.
For sure.
So how's LA kind of changed over obviously with pandemic, you hear
Right.
all these crazy stories, and like even being here in Texas, we see a lot of California people come in. Wow, that was really weird to say it that way, but Californians.
Oh yeah, no, it's an exodus happening. Like we're even seriously contemplating moving to Austin soon.
Nice.
So, and we visited and loved it. If you had told me a year ago that I was thinking of moving to Texas, I'd be like, what? and now I'm like, no, this sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's shifted for sure.
Yeah.
It is
But
shifted for sure.
even in Austin, it is not cheap to live. Like, I mean, I'm sure it's right now it's probably a little bit cheaper than LA, but
Oh yeah.
I know I've worked with some people that live in the suburbs around Austin. They're like, the last year, everything's just shot up like crazy. Like,
Yeah.
so.
I believe that, because even we had looked at like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and it was like, you can get it at like 18 to 2000, and here like your 1-bedroom is minimum 1600, 1800, and you're like, what? So we still are like, you can get a big bang for your buck over there.
Yeah. Especially if you're willing to live outside of the city.
For sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which I think is the plan anyway. We're trying to position ourselves to actually save and buy a house.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, yeah, here, I don't know. My intuition is just like, and even my other friends who play session work and they're just starting to like play sessions again and they've been doing a lot of like remote recordings this whole time.
Yeah.
I can't really see this happening to the extent that it was functioning for at least another year or two.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it gets, and it's also really complicated for singers because it's our mouth, and to like be in a room with people. There's just a lot of logistics I think people are thinking about, and there's like liability and things like that. So I just don't, it's like the engines are like starting to do it, but like we're already almost in December of this year.
Yep.
So my spidey senses are like, might need to leave soon.
Yeah.
Just because we also live in an area, we're in West Hollywood.
Okay.
So, and I've lived in North Hollywood, and I've lived in Santa Monica on the west side, and now we're in like WeHo. And it's been a little heartbreaking for me to see our city just get, I don't know.
Yeah. It's done a massive change in the last year. Like,
it's kind of, unless it's interesting to talk to people about this in other neighborhoods, because if you're not having to leave your house or can't, you're not really going to see the physical changes, but the homelessness, it like everything here just got completely exacerbated.
Yeah.
Like I had my former boss that I used to work for like 3 years, but work kind of slowed down. And then I started doing my own thing too, artistically, but he's in Canada.
Yeah.
And when he visited here, maybe a few years ago, he was like, oh my God, the homelessness. Like, it's just interesting to hear someone from Canada or another country, like, especially in LA, when you come, because honestly, if you don't have a home, California is your best bet to survive because of the weather. So I had told him, I was like, if you thought it was
bad,
overwhelming prior, you are going to freak out the next time you come here. I mean, downtown has like completely changed.
Yeah.
Where it was like, okay, I don't feel like we're getting the help and resources that like the city's really needing, because it's there. And we also see people who look very new to the street too. And it's just that's a very brutal truth, but it needs to get talked about, because I'm like, a lot of that also dives into addiction and mental illness and all these other things that I have a major soft spot for to really acknowledge. And it's gotten bad and it's going to keep getting worse. And I've kind of reached a point where, even though it's my home state, I would almost rather have my money go into an economy where I'm like, okay, this actually feels like other things are happening and getting distributed to people in a different way than here, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Is the is the homelessness situation getting bad up in San Francisco as well, or is it just okay?
Yeah, and the crime for both. The crime? Yeah.
Well, that's just unfortunate. Like,
I know it's hard. It's such a complicated thing, because it's like, when we were here, I mean, our apartment, we can hear a lot going on in like the street, because we're in an alleyway, so we can hear like noise bounce off of everywhere. So like the stimulation of like constant sirens and helicopters, I was like, hang on, this was not to this magnitude a year ago. I'm like, I know I'm like, we're in the house, but it's just, there was definitely a point where opportunists took advantage of this time. And there was also a portion of that where I think people got very cornered and so desperate that they were willing to do whatever it took to survive as well. So I think it's a lot of everything, and it's all happening in the same ball, tangled ball of things. So, and we're witnessing it and hearing it. And so that's why it's a very like, if you don't live here, you would never know that that's happening, but it is. And, it's kind of heartbreaking for me to be like, God, this is my home state. This is, it's going to take some time to like really bounce back, I think, from this on a economic level, and for the city to recover.
On every level, it's going to take some time and effort to kind of get back to a state of normalcy, that even means anymore,
Right.
So
I totally agree. I think it's going to be a lot of patience is going to be happening to actually see that there's going to be, I don't know if it will ever go back to normal, to be honest. I think people have also kind of come to within themselves that they're like, don't know if I am able to repeat what I was conditioning myself to do.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
Yeah. So it's a lot of good change. I think it's just a lot of drastic, extreme things are all happening at the same time. And it's kind of overwhelming to like process
Yeah.
on so many layers and levels, but
Yeah.
collectively, I think it's a very, I'm actually very grateful to be born during this time, because I think we're witnessing a big shift for the positive in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree as well. And if you do end up making that move to Austin, I know it's going to be amazing and just fun all around. So
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's I think it's really going to happen. It's just a matter of when we can swing it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, wait till after the year and just kind of see where things are when the new year hits, because
exactly,
it's one of those things that I've learned your life can change like
super
that.
fast, which we're also anticipating too. I'm like, okay, every time I think this is happening, we get pulled this way.
Yep. Let's talk about, so you've got the album coming out in the early part of next year. What went into the song selection process? And just let's talk about the song selection process. And were you specifically writing to release an album, or were you writing for like singles? What was kind of the thought process as well?
When I actually first started, the first song on the album took me almost like a year to finish.
Okay.
So the intention didn't really start with singles. It was like I just ended up having sessions with Mitchell and was like, hey, I'm getting a ton of ideas now, and stuff is kind of flowing through me. I think I was just creatively blocked for a long time, just like going through life. And I was finally like opening up again. And at that point, it was like, I just want to make stuff that sounds beautiful and makes me feel really good. And it didn't even intend on that song that I'm talking about too will be on the album, but we're like saving it because it's a lot about boundaries and self-love and like saying yes to you and no to others, which we had ironically already talked about earlier. But once that one was kind of finished, then a lot of other things started kind of like happening. And I was just writing lyrics on my phone and then would start thinking of melodies. And then I was like, oh, I guess I can do this. I think it was like I had been in a supportive role for so long. I'm sure too, like you may have probably experienced this with your jobs and just like working in a creative environment too, where you're like, your identity gets attached to like one thing. And for a long time, I was like resisting or not thinking I could be an artist. And then it just turned into this whole metamorphosis of like, oh no, this is a lot of what I'm writing about too is very universal. And I thought that was pretty important too, just with intention to like help people feel heard and feel seen and feel good. Just because there's so many things on a daily basis right now that it's like a combative sensation where you're like, this is like taking 3 times as much to feel good right now with so much happening. So yeah, it just organically unfolded like that. One song that finished that took a long time just because it was so emotionally jerking for me to get out. And then once it was out, I was like, oh, and then it kind of seemed like this whole well opened up of creative flow. And then that turned into, I actually had a team of people. It's so much better with a team because then you're like, cool, I can focus on this and people can help guide. But then the vision started happening of like, I can actually weave all of these into a project and have it be like this cathartic experience for listeners, especially if you did like a start to finish listen. Those are always crazy. I mean, like, I feel like Pink Floyd and those guys, they always did albums where it was like, if you start it, it's going to be an experience. I'm not saying I'm Pink Floyd, but it's no one is Pink Floyd. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Where it was like top to bottom, and you come out and you're like, dang, that was a journey.
Experience.
Yeah. And that's kind of what it's turning into, which is pretty cool.
Nice. So you said the magic phrase that this album is meant to be listened from start to beginning as a complete project. So that brings up the next question of, are you going to print vinyl?
Ooh, I think we have actually talked about that, and that will probably happen eventually for sure.
Awesome.
Because most of there's many songs on this album that will sound so good on vinyl just because of the instrumentation. There's a lot of warm sounds. So I feel like on vinyl too, it'll be just such a good, cozy feeling. And even on the more like ballady, poignant ones, it'll still have that kind of like nostalgic, I don't know. There's something about vinyl where it's like gooey when you listen to it. You're like, oh, this is so good.
I'm so excited that vinyl is made. Like, I don't want to call it a
comeback
because it's always been around. You just had to have been like the subculture, I guess.
For sure.
But now that it's kind of making the mainstream, and when you go to Target, Best Buy, Walmart, and they've got vinyl sitting out for sale, like, that's pretty cool. And the fact
it's
that
like in the forefront too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
awesome.
really cool. And I mean, I need to get myself a little bit better of a record player, because I've got a little one of those little suitcase Victrola deals that you can get at for like 20, $30. But I got it when I wasn't sure how big vinyl was going to get. I just kind of liked the idea. And then it just started taking off. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should invest in a really good vinyl player. So,
I think vinyl, once we figure out like vinyl and like merch, it'll be like the icing on the cake, because that'll be like the full thing of experience. But I totally agree. Anytime I've even heard vinyl of
I love it so much.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So you got the album coming out. Do you have any shows on the books coming up, or is that kind of not a thing that you're worrying about at this point?
What we just started talking about was to do like a cool house show. That's been happening here. Was always kind of a thing even before pandemic times. We had friends that would like host musicians, and it was like it became more of like a communal exchange too, which was really nice. So some of my friends in the film scoring industry were like, it could be like a release party, a pre-release thing. And they got a really pretty backyard where it's like a big, I think it's a massive oak tree, and like those little Edison tea light bulbs. And I think I'm going to try and get Mitchell to play guitar, and maybe my friend who's an incredible cello player to play cello, and do like an acoustic string situation, and do all the songs, and maybe like a little Christmas cozy cover, and do that. And then after that, kind of figure out other shows. We do have some other like live recording sets that are like in the process of being booked. I think for like December, January. So the synergy is actually aligning very well for like the release of the project, and I at least wanted enough music of my own, where especially if whenever we nest in Austin, if that happens, I could open for somebody or have a set of my own, and it'd be like, no, this is all my music. Oh my gosh.
It's interesting because you technically started your solo music career in the middle of a pandemic. So a lot of this stuff, not that it's something that you didn't think about, but it's something you didn't have to worry about at a point because like there wasn't live shows happening. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to just record, play, and see where we land when the smoke clears. And now we're finally getting to that point where it's like, oh, shows may be a very real possibility here. And like, I mean, in Texas, they're already playing shows. They've been playing shows pretty much since November of last year. Like there've been shows consistently going on. And I think that was the original appeal for musicians in Texas, because shows never really stopped more than like 2 months. I think there was like a 2-month gap where shows were like, no, paused. It's not happening. Yeah. So, it's interesting. What was it, something that you had started giving thought to before the pandemic hit to start working towards your solo career? Obviously you'd been writing music for a bit there, but like what kind of went into the thought process?
I think it was during. It was during. Yeah, I'm not a person that likes attention on me. Which is kind of like which is hence why I was in such like supportive roles, and like I loved helping other people shine. And then it was also like, I think it's just the whole, like, I had enough teachers who were like, it's not even about, there's a phrase where it's like, it's not about the talent, it's about like audacity to do the thing. And then, obviously you will be talented on some level, but the people that end up doing it have the audacity to do so, not necessarily because they're like, out of this world talented. And to me that really resonated, because sometimes a lot of times I can be a perfectionist of things and just have that kind of brain where I'm like, nope, just very critical. And then that really during the pandemic, it was like tapping into a part of myself. I think I was going through so much healing on warp speed because I had the time to actually like get the space, process, feel, rest, and take care of myself, and surround myself with really, really good people. I was like, oh, I can do this. I've been psyching myself out that I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's always like you are your own limitations, and that was kind of my big moment where it was like, well, you're not gonna, it's funny. It's like when you make music, I even had teachers who, you're not gonna die. Like no one it's very easy to like wrap yourself up in anxiety or fear about how's this gonna land? It's just a vulnerable thing, especially when you put yourself out there like that. But at this point, I feel like I've been through the trenches, as does everyone. I feel so. I've kind of reached my capacity of like, if it's for you, it's for you, and if it's not, that's okay too, because there's plenty of other things for people to enjoy, and that was kind of freeing in a way to actually like go and do the thing and not be scared about it anymore.
Yep, absolutely. So we've kind of been jumping around a lot, and I just kind of want to clarify for a lot of the people that are listening, there's a lot of stuff we haven't talked about, and I don't know if we'll quite get to it all because we could be here for another 2 hours. For another 2 hours. But, so like on paper, when you go and look at like Spotify, it says that your solo career just started. Was it August when the first
Like
single?
April. Yeah.
April. So
Yeah.
it just started in April, but you have a pretty storied career so far. Like you've done like done background singing for a few different people, and then you've
Hmm.
also got the film scoring stuff,
Hmm.
which is actually really interesting because your first film. I wish my first film was of the caliber of Despicable Me 3.
I know.
Like just like that. Like, I mean, I didn't see Despicable Me 3, but just like,
That's okay. It's a franchise.
yeah, it's a franchise, it's a big name, just
Yeah.
everything. So, let's talk about that for a second. How did you get into the film scoring?
Yeah, I was an intern.
Mhm.
I started as an intern. Um, the first composer I interned with was Bear McCreary, who does The Walking Dead and Black Sails and Outlander, and he has got a ton of shows under his belt. And that job was how I landed my studio
Mhm.
manager position. I only was there for like a summer, and I was doing more like admin
Yeah.
intern work and just like helping
Like
out with
you were
whatever
like
they needed.
coordinating and stuff, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't even that. So it was sometimes it was also like, hey, we need lunch or we need this or it was like whatever they needed.
Yeah.
Um, you kind of act like a runner too, and just help alleviate the process because it's like this. That whole world is very stressful just
Oh, yeah.
because of how tight deadlines are and how much money is usually involved as well. Um, and then after that, I worked at Remote Control Productions, which is Hans Zimmer's company. And he has his own studio in Santa Monica where he rents out different spaces to other composers. So I worked with Heitor Pereira, who is this super talented man from Brazil. And he used to be the guitarist for like Simply Red, and was a pretty well known, like he played a lot of sessions, especially for Hans. And then from what I was told, he was able to think of melodies quite quickly on the fly. And then it kind of got into that realm of like, and now we're writing music for film, and then landed the whole Minion franchise and Despicable Me. So he did a lot of like family animation movies, which is its own beast because with animation, they can change picture with live actual footage. You like match it to the actual, what's happening in action
live footage,
in real
what
time.
you have is what you have.
Exactly. And with animation, they're like, we changed this, and you're like, oh. So and then we did that, and I did the nut job too there. So there was some good family films that came out. And then after that, I ended up working for Andrew Lockington and would work from home.
Yeah.
And I had this is when actually, now that I think about it, I had a sense that I was wanting to shift more towards being an artist. And I had kind of forewarned him like, hey, would I work like part-time and just do whatever you need me to do admin wise? Is that cool? Just so that I can have the freedom to gig, but I was still on the train of like being a vocal, like a contractor myself as a vocalist to sing for other people or do session work or do other gigs in LA. And he was like, yeah, totally fine. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. And then it just kind of kept transitioning. Now that I think about it, it was like it was like full blown focus management. And then we kind of teetered to part-time. And we're gigging more and we're singing more in front of people. And now I'm like completely doing my own work. It's the first time where I was like, oh no, I'm actually like singing my own stuff. And like, because before it was always like, hey, she's an alto and can hold harmonies. get her.
Nice.
And she can hold the weird parts that no one wants to sing.
Yeah.
I love singing them. Some people don't.
So are you still working in the film scoring aspect, or is that completely done and you're focused 100% on
For now, it's on pause.
Mhm.
What's been interesting is I've been able to carry so much of what I was witnessing and hearing from that world into my own music with like instrumental layers and the kind of sounds, like the lushness that you would sometimes hear. And like it does have a cinematic effect to it, where if you actually, it's like you could see a movie in your brain. I don't know, when you hear certain songs, and especially if it like got synced to picture, I didn't even intend for that to happen. I mean, that's a dream of mine that I hope comes true soon. But yeah, it's like it's here with me in just a different form. Now I'm just not doing that. I incorporated elements of it into my own craft, which is nice.
Yeah. What's been the hardest part about writing your own music?
I think for me too, I have a habit of having expectations that can kind of bite me in the butt.
Yeah.
But it's also been allowing enough room for, I think, unexpected changes to come up, where it's like even the people I've talked to who sometimes, because I have such a planner brain, because I had done so much management work and other organizational things, that it was like, okay, if you actually have a date to release a song or whatever, sometimes things happen where you have to push. And I think that was like, and the larger answer to that question is giving up control.
Yeah.
Which I was like, okay.
Here we go.
I'm just going, we're trusting. This is good. And actually having a team that I can depend on and rely on has been massive, because I wouldn't have felt as comfortable to do that, only because change is uncomfortable for me, and I think for a lot of people. So that kind of like smoothed the transition a bit. But for sure, that was the hardest thing, is to like give up my control and just like let things happen the way they needed to happen.
Yep, absolutely. I completely understood. At least you got a team around you that's there to help and support you. That's got to be a very important aspect to everything. Like, as much as you want to sit here and say, "Oh, I can do it by myself."
No,
yeah,
you can, but it's like, when you're independent, there's so many things, and you can only get so far, I feel, without it like taking your energy and attention away from actually creating
your music. Like, especially as a musician, your job is to create the music.
Right.
And there's the argument to be made about being active on your own social media, and I think there's an authenticity. Like you mentioned authenticity, and earlier, I think there's a certain level of authenticity when the musician runs their own Facebook page.
Oh, totally.
Whatever their social media of choice.
Instagram, all of it. Yeah.
But that being said, it's like there's so much social media out there where it's like, I have a hard enough time running Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And then you throw TikTok on top of there, and I don't have the personality for TikTok. So it's like,
I know. Me either.
Yeah.
I think it was like, if you were born after like 1990, you were like, I don't know. I think I'm just old enough. I'm old enough and young enough to be like, I can get down with these.
Yeah.
This one I don't understand yet.
Actually, I like the Clubhouse app. I use it that
one is awesome.
Like, Clubhouse is just awesome. I Yeah. I don't use it a whole lot because they started incorporating same features in other social media apps, but
Right.
you know, like that whole, especially during the pandemic where you could just have conversations about whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So
Yes. Yeah, I like that one a lot. You can meet some incredible people through that
oh yeah, for
portal.
sure. So don't want to keep you too much longer, but
How is it? I know I'm like an hour's gone by.
yeah. And like I'm just sitting here I'm like thinking about what we talked about. I'm like, oh, we haven't touched on this, we haven't touched on this, we haven't touched on this.
Okay,
Well,
we covered a lot of ground, I still feel.
Yeah. I mean that's where we've got next week's podcast. We can
Also
touch on a lot of
true.
this stuff. But outside of music,
Yeah.
what when you need to escape and just kind of decompress, or when you decide to take that 6-week break because you're burnt out,
Yeah.
what is your go-to? What are some of your hobbies? You know?
I love walking. I know that sounds so simple, but I used to be a runner, and then my knees were like, "What are you doing?" So we walk a lot. We try at least to do like, I don't know, sometimes a 45-minute situation, at least to get in the sun too, and like look, I respond to stimuli in nature as like I'm like we are nature. So like when you do see nature, you're like, this is resonating. And that's a big one for me, to just like go out, and I don't have my phone with me, and just kind of look at and we get to see the seasons change. I know it's like Los Angeles seasons change, which isn't a big difference, but stuff that blooms and stuff that's like changing. And it's just kind of nice to look at, because it is beautiful here. There's like, for sure, amazing pockets like of this city that still exist.
Yeah.
And other than that, I'll do yoga or stretch. I'm kind of tall, so my back, like otherwise I gotta like get things moving, so I'm not like stiff and achy, just because I feel it's super easy to have like emotions get trapped in your body right now too. And then other than that, if I'm also like needing to like detach, I'll just listen to music. Obviously that's not my own. I just put on headphones and will like lay there, and I will literally type in like calming on Spotify, or like binaural beats, and then like go from there, and do that. And we cook a lot too, which is also like a very therapeutic thing. So those are kind of some of the things. They're all very self-care, self-carey, but
but in this day and age, that's very important, especially with everything that's been going on the last year and a half.
Yeah.
Like even just outside of personal experiences, just in general in America, the last year and a half, self-care is so important right now. Like just in general.
Yeah.
Speaking in general terms. So
exactly. I agree.
So crazy that 2021 is almost over.
Honestly, when October hit, I was like, we're done. Because as soon as Halloween is here, it's like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. It was like vanished.
I woke up last week and I had a panic attack because I realized it was like November. And I'm like, wait, what? Where'd this year? Like, I mean, I know where the year went, but
where did it go?
Yeah.
I honestly feel time is moving quite faster. I don't know if that's just me, but this year in particular, I was like, okay, no, this is, are we moving? This is different. This is feeling different. And it could just be I'm getting older.
Well, and maybe it's just one of those things where we know pretty much all of last year was I felt like last year was like the slowest
Mm-hmm.
a year ever went.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we're kind of getting back to normal, whatever that means anymore,
Right.
it's like, oh, life's going to pass you right by. Like, you need to pay attention and get on the ball, like whatever
Right.
that means to you. So,
Right.
yeah, I 100% agree.
Yes.
I can't believe like 2 weeks, it's Thanksgiving.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
we're finding the joy.
Yep. I've had this 6-week vacation on my calendar for a month and a half already. And I just realized yesterday, it's like, oh, that 6-week vacation is like next Monday.
Oh, and you're like, what am I going to do with myself? We
Yep.
have so many options right
Yep.
now.
And I don't like, I want to make sure that I use the time to take care of what I need to take care of. I don't want to end up sitting on the couch for 6 weeks straight,
Yeah,
because that's not going to do anybody any good. Like, yeah, maybe I'll
right.
get some rest, but sitting on the couch for 6 weeks, yeah, it sounds fun, but not going to really help me in any way. So,
No, I think you'll do a little salt and pepper of stuff, I'm sure.
yeah, I'll
Sprinkle it
probably
in
end
there.
up baking. That'll probably be what I end up doing. Is
Ooh,
with
there's
it
nothing
being
wrong with
Christmas
that.
time, I love to eat Christmas cookies. So that'll
Yeah,
probably be my thing.
that sounds like a great plan. And also not having a plan is good too.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll leave it right there. We'll leave it at that. I don't have a plan, but it'll probably involve Christmas cookies.
That's it. That's all we need to know.
Yes.
That's amazing. You're setting yourself up for success just with that.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to first off, I want to thank you for jumping on the podcast. And I hope to see you down in Austin here soon.
Yeah.
However quickly it'll happen.
However it happens.
Because it's one of those things where it's like, been looking at moving to Austin. There's just so much work available down there. It's like,
Mhm.
and it wouldn't be that, because when I move, I make big moves.
Ah,
Like I moved from Chicago to Southern Illinois.
okay.
So like that wasn't a big move, but it was
Right.
like, considering I hadn't really ever moved more than an hour before, like 5-6 hours, that's a pretty big move.
Yes.
And then I moved out to Roswell, New Mexico.
Oh,
And then I moved
whoa.
to Tallahassee.
Oh my
And then I
God.
moved back out to Waco. And at one point I was in the process of moving up to Williston, North Dakota. So it was just kind of like all these really big moves.
What?
And it's like, I think the next one needs to be a little bit more
Small.
small. Yeah. So
Oh, that's been the case for me too. It was like Bay Area, Boston, Bay Area, LA.
yeah.
Now it'll be Austin whenever that'll be. But yeah, thank you so much for having me too. This was very the time flew by.
Yeah.
I had a
I'm
great
sitting here
time.
like, oh, wait. Where'd this time go?
Whoops.
But no, I really appreciate it. If people want to check out your album when it drops, the new single when it drops, any upcoming shows, where's the best place for them to do that?
My website, which is just my name, nice and easy, megangraney.com. And then my Patreon is there too. If you want to support the art that I make too, that's a big platform artists are using to be able to do the things that we're doing.
Yep.
And then Instagram is just megan.graney. So it's, once you have my name, you can find me on all the things.
Yep.
And then the album will be on all the streaming platforms that you can think of, which is so many that DistroKid now sends to. But same thing with the single. It will be very easy to find. We're going to make it easy to find the music and to find me. So
Awesome.
yeah,
So one last question I have to ask.
sure.
What's one thing that you miss about the Bay Area that you just can't get in LA?
Oh,
or it's not the same?
yeah. I don't even mean to sound like a hater, but the people the people are like different. It's just a different vibe. I
Yeah.
don't know. And totally I sound like such a Californian. It's a vibe, but it's just a way more soulful, laid back, easy. I don't know. It's just like I would say that it has a totally different tone to it up there, culture wise, and even nature too.
Yeah.
Like I miss being able to see, like, because down here is different. We have desert and mountains
Yeah.
and like beach, which is awesome, but I'm a big fan of trees.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot more trees up there, and you can actually get the season change a little more because it'll be colder up there. So I would say those are my most missed things. It's
Yeah.
just the way your body kind of feels
Yeah.
around people, and the conversations you can naturally have with people are a little bit different
Yeah.
than here.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
I guess I can't say agree because I've never been to San Francisco, but it makes sense.
It's a good time, and San Francisco's too is also so different in its own hub than the Bay Area. Like
Okay.
when you go into Berkeley
Yeah.
and
Sorry, I
Oakland.
keep saying San Francisco, but that's
No, it's okay. It's so big.
yeah.
It's just like there's so much stuff to see. So I would say you can get a lot of everything wherever you go. It's like, I mean, down here is a big melting pot too, but it's I don't know. It's also home, so it's just like a cozy nostalgia when I'm there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely understood. Well, once again, I want to thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. It's been a blast talking with you, and I look forward to talking more next week about
Yes.
a lot of the stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about today. It was just sitting here. It's like, luckily we have next week because
We do. We have next Sunday.
Yeah.
Catch us a week from today, everyone.
Yep. So make sure you tune into the PanCan virtual podcast fundraiser in honor of my mother. It'll be a
Yes.
good time. I was contemplating on starting a ticker on how many times tears are brought to my eyes, but I'm not really an emotional person, so that would be kind of embarrassing if it just sat at 0 the entire time. So
Who knows? Now you put it out there. We have no idea where it could go
yeah, absolutely. So
on Sunday.
we'll see how all of next weekend turns out, and I look forward to talking to you next Sunday. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you all later.
Yeah.